Hello, coaches. I'm Claire Chancellor from Be Your Purpose Coaching and Training. Today, I want to take you through a particular process known as the drop down method. Now, this is something that we teach in our NLP Master Practitioner training. It is incredibly powerful. If you're trained in NLP, you will know timeline and you will know that we use the timeline process to go back in time to help somebody gain the learnings to resolve limiting decisions and uncomfortable negative emotions. This is timeline itself is quite horizontal. We go back along the time stream back to that event. But the drop down method is actually going vertical, dropping down to gain the learnings. This particular process, if you get started, you absolutely have to finish it. So let me get the slideshow. Let's get started, and I'll show you the steps on how to do the drop down method precisely to get those amazing results for your clients. So I've got to say straight up, you need to be a confident NLP master practitioner to be able to facilitate this particular process effectively. You need to be confident in your ability to carry through and facilitate this process, because if you are not confident, then the client's going to feel that and it's going to make this process that much more difficult. The drop down method, as I've said, is incredibly powerful. In fact, I taught my NLP master practitioners this just last night, and it was just like everybody was blown away. This one is for those enduring negative emotions where you've done timeline several times with the client, and it's not, the client's not getting that oomph, like powerful result that you want them to get, or that they want to get, I should say. So this is definitely a process for clients who are familiar with timeline, who are familiar with that mind-body connection, to be able to name the feeling, name where they feel it in the body. Otherwise, if they are not familiar with that, this process can be quite uncomfortable for the client to have to, analyze where am I feeling that in the body, name the feelings. You need to do this process with somebody who's already familiar and comfortable with their mind body connection. So, as I've already said at the beginning, you have to be confident to facilitate this process. The discomfort that can come up can be quite intense for the client until they move through the layers, move through the different chains down to the bottom where there's this sensation of like nothingness but connectedness, yet a voidness is quite incredible. It's almost like what you'd call that flow state, or like connecting to your higher self. You move through all the difficult, limiting emotions, and then you find yourself at this particular euphoric nothingness. It's quite strange and quite wonderful all at once. So, again, this particular process is for those heavy duty emotions that timeline just haven't been oomphy enough to be able to resolve. So, things like depression, resentment, shame, guilt, anger, everything that you've done timeline for, and yet you need a bit more oomph. So, as I said at the beginning, the timeline process typically or traditionally moves horizontally, going back to a time where that negative emotion first got, the root cause. This one, as I said, we're moving through the different layers going down a chain. Now, I absolutely love, love, love this process. And from my experience, I know that this works really well for people who are already on that self-development journey. They're already on that spiritual journey. It's the intuitive people who get this process, whereas the people who are quite logical, analytical, they make it a lot harder for themselves by wanting to analyze, what does this mean? Am I getting it right? This is not the analyzing process. This is the go with it process, and then we can analyze it later. So when you think about how somebody does depression, how does that impact them and how does that impact their health? There's that, maybe that brain fog feeling, the hopelessness, the body aches and pains, the fatigue. There's this needing to escape life. And we don't, or I don't know if we do, but I don't think we just wake up with depression. I know that depression is that layering of heavy duty emotions one after the other to the point where we're just completely down the bottom of that spiral of the emotional frequency, right? Where you've gone from being quite neutral to maybe frustrated, angry, feeling that sense of blame, hopelessness, depression. So the client themselves have definitely gone down all of the different layers to that really heavy duty emotion. So what this process does is move them through those layers to be able to get back to that neutral point of view. Do not do this process with a phobia. You don't want your client to go into a phobic response. Go do the fast phobia model. That's not what this process is for. You can definitely use it for fear, but not phobias. Now, when I'm going to take you through the steps, but just setting this up properly, I want to let you know that your client will likely have healing amnesia. That's one of my terms after the session. They may come to you with a heavy duty, all consuming sense of betrayal or depression or hopelessness. And then you do this process, it's so profound that when they get to the other side, you've scrambled their neural network, they can't actually access the way that they used to do hopelessness or depression. So you may notice that they have healing amnesia where it's good to forget what you first came in for. And so make sure that you structure your follow-up questions accordingly so that they are set to continue with the empowered journey rather than remembering how bad it was. For optimum results, the client needs to have a thing that they are moving towards. So if they're coming to you for betrayal or depression, when you say, okay, when we get to the end of this process, how do you want to be instead? What do you want to be moving towards? What do you want to create instead? Not having depression is not the answer. Feeling enthusiastic about life, feeling confident about life, you need to make sure that the client has something that they're moving towards. So, so when I teach this, we had a particular client where, she's holding on to some heavy duty emotions about parents divorcing and humiliation at school, all the things. And it was impacting her in the way that she showed up in her life for her kids and for work and so on and so forth. So instead of saying, well, how do you want to be, if you're not holding on to this betrayal and humiliation, how do you want to be instead? And it's quite interesting to watch her eye patterns, like, oh my gosh, is that even possible to live without this? So you may need to assist your client to explore the possibilities that they can actually be the way that they want to be. If you're not humiliated, how are you showing up in life? What difference does that make for your children? What difference does that make for the way that you feel about your body, your mind, your experience of life? Like, what do you want instead? The other next piece after that is you need to make sure that the client also has something that you, the coach, can see the evidence that things have changed. So it's a little bit like that thing we say in NLP, can you put it in a wheelbarrow? If I'm working with a client who wants to manifest in more amazing clients, then we want to make sure that as a coach, I can see their diary is full of amazing clients. Like we need that evidence procedure. So I think last night when we were doing this process, it was all about that client feeling really good and radiant in their skin, in their body. And so therefore, it's not just seeing them feel that, but seeing how they dress, see how they show up, noticing what they're saying to themselves. And in fact, I said, well, we need to anchor that, like make sure that whatever the good message it is that you want for yourself, put it on a post-it note, put it in the wardrobe or put it on the fridge just to reinforce the good messages so that you can do the evidence procedure to show that things are shifting and changing. Pretty cool. So, like most NLP processes, set the frame so that there's that, you've learnt this, it's a one-time learning, so therefore the changes can happen quite quickly. Set the frame up to know that they're going to be accessing their time stream or their timeline. And you have to have gone through the timeline process with them beforehand. So they already know intuitively which way is the past, which way is the future. because that's one of the first pieces of this process is to go back in time to the very first event, and then we drop down. Now, then we get them to actually associate into that negative feeling. So last night we worked through sense of humiliation. How is it impacting you? So you've done the meta model, right? You've worked out how are they doing this problem, and therefore how is it impacting their life? You're getting them to associate into that so that when you can ask them the typical timeline questions, like when you get in trusting the first thing that comes to mind, the first event of this humiliation, was it this lifetime, past life, in the womb, or ancestral? And trusting the first thing that comes to mind, how many lifetimes ago or what age. What we're doing there is we're getting them to recognize that the unconscious mind is going to take us back to the very first event of humiliation or the depression. And of course, I've spoken much faster than I'm doing my slides. So, yeah, we need to check in. What's the root cause of this negative emotion, which, when disconnected, would cause it to disappear completely from your life? Was it this life, past life, in the womb space, or ancestral? And that's my little map. That's what I show in my trainings to for those visual learners. Like, what's the root cause of this negative emotion or limiting decision, and then tracking that as it says. So, like timeline, we're going to invite that client now to float up above their body, floating up higher and higher, getting in touch with their time stream, and zooming all the way back to the root cause of this humiliation or depression. So, floating all the way back, and we're not getting them to drop down into that event. What we're going to get them to do is to look down so you can see what you saw, just to get a perspective of when that or what caused that event to occur. Now, this is where the fun begins, and I absolutely love this piece. This is when you getting the client to drop down into that event, notice what feelings are there. Now, we're not going to go and check who else is there or, is it daytime, nighttime? What we're going to do is we're going to drop down into that event the very first time you felt humiliated. Let's say it's like past life or something. Tell me, where do you feel that humiliation in the body? And where do you feel that humiliation in the body? And on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most, what's the intensity of that feeling? Now, in fact, I still have my notes from last show you exactly what they are, but I am writing down exactly what the client is saying. So whether it's like, okay, it was they're feeling it in the chest, it's a score of 8, then the next, so I'm writing all of that down because we're going to use that within the rest of that process. So then the next question thereafter, what's the intensity scale of 1 to 10? You get the client to connect into that feeling and you ask them what's the purpose of that feeling. They will tell you, you write it down. And then what are the learnings that are there within that purpose? So we're going to get them to tell us a little bit more. So thinking about last night, the client first went to, there's the intense feeling in the throat. It was a score of 8. And the purpose of that feeling was to actually teach them something. That's all they got. And that was fabulous. So it's there to teach me something. What learnings are there within that purpose of, learning something? And the client said, to gain a new perspective. That's all we need. Then all we're going to do now is to ask the client to stay in that feeling, take a breath, and then all I want them to do is drop into what's underneath that feeling. So previously we had the humiliation, drop down into that feeling, what's underneath it, like a time tunnel. And again, it's the same questions. Tell me, where do you feel that feeling? Or what's the feeling? Where do you feel it in your body? Okay, so the next one, it's like in my shoulders. It's sadness on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most. What's the intensity of that feeling? It's a 7. And then connecting to the emotions, what's the purpose of that? What's the purpose of that sadness? And then tell me, what are the learnings within that purpose? You can get them a couple more sentences. We don't need a whole story. But again, you are going to write it down, the sadness, it's a 7, shoulders, what's the what's the feelings and what's the purpose of that feeling? What will happen is starting. So you continue to do that process over and over again. You repeat that same thing. So we're going into the sadness, what's underneath that sadness. Okay, interesting. What feeling are you feeling under the sadness? Rate it 1 to 10. What's the purpose of it? What's the learnings of the purpose? Take a big breath in. Okay, and like a time tunnel dropping underneath that sadness, what feelings are there? Now, I've done this particular process with clients where they've gone through maybe 5 layers, and I've gone through clients where they've gone through about 15 layers. You just hold the space, and what you'll notice, there's going to be a pattern where the number becomes a little bit less, and then they start to move into this amazing sense of either appreciation, curiosity, love, but you're not there yet. You're not there yet. So when you get to the good high vibe feelings, take notice of that. Things are going to shift really quickly. And once you get through the good feelings, you still say, where do you feel that in the body on a scale of 1 to 10? What's the purpose of that feeling? What are the learnings within that within that purpose of those feelings? You still want to get the aha moments for the good emotions, and then you keep going until you get to this, like the client will just go like almost quiet, like, oh, and there's this sense of like nothingness, connected, voidy kind of euphoria. It's really weird. I've had clients where they feel like they're laying down, looking at the stars, and it's almost like being in outer space. I've had clients who have dropped down into like this brilliant white light and it's sort of like tingly. I have had clients who have just gone into this warmth of like rose quartz crystal, and it's just bliss. And it's sort of like, oh, why have I been making it so hard for myself? And again, still bring in the summerdelity work of like what's the feeling, what's the color, notice where you feel that euphoric, lovey, good feeling, where is that in the body? Capture that, capture those feel good feelings. Because then what we're going to do is we're going to move up through the layers that we've previously gone down the chain. Now we're going to take those feel good feelings up through the chain and to be able to utilize all of those previous levels. So as I've already said there, what's the color? Do all of your good NLP work, like dial it up, expand out that yummy feel good feeling, knowing that your body can hold onto that resourceful state. If you're doing anchors or they're holding a crystal or something, do whatever you need to really build on that amazing feeling. And so now what we do is we're going to move up through the layers that we've previously gone down. And you can tell them exactly that. You can tell them that notice that we have gone down all of these particular layers. And now what we're going to do is we're going to rise up that old tunnel of emotions. And as you move through each event, we're going to smash through the old ways, bringing forward that sense of renewed hope, strength, curiosity, pretty much write down the good feeling, everything that they said at the beginning that they want to have. This is where we're repeating it. We're like, yep. And so making sure we have those new learnings, the growth, the expansion of energy. We're just bringing in all of the yumminess. So we're going to float up. And so, not to, so thinking about last night's client, she got to that void. She has of this free light blue energy. And so we brought up that light blue energy up into where the sadness was in the shoulders and just to expand out that light blue energy and then move up into the throat there where previously there was that humiliation, bringing in that energy, now moving up again, so that we're going right back to that time stream, back to that root cause. When we went back along the timeline, back to the past, we're going to bring all of that yummy good energy to that good moment. And we're just going to, neutralize to be able to preserve the learnings there and to be able to let go of those limiting feelings that were connected to it. Just checking my slide because I could go ahead of myself, enthusiastic about this. And so then you can do all of your good timeline stuff. Notice that the limiting feeling of humiliation is gone. There's just that infinite source of love and healing, and the aha moments overflowing throughout your aura, doing all of that yummy good work. And then before they come back to now, just like we do with timeline, you want to make sure that we go into the future, be it a week or a month or a year into the future, and just noticing that with that access to the new good feelings, noticing how you feel in the future, noticing the new choices available, and noticing what you have to believe about yourself to be able to access that sense of absolute euphoria, anchoring that into the future, and then getting them to come back into the now, bringing them back, wiggling those fingers and toes, head held high, big breath in, and when you're ready, opening your eyes to a whole new you. Now, I would expect from that particular client to then move into that sense of wonder, excitement. Of course, they're still going to be, you know, in this sense of that healing integration-y phase. But instead of running the old neural pathways, we have now created a whole new chain of amazing resources available to them. So profound. I love this process. But I love this process because I typically work with people who have done the past life regression and the quantum NLP and the self-development. This is where they know how to get themselves to that ultimate state of release, that surrender, and to be able to then bring forward the new learnings and the new teachings into their future. It's just like, so yeah, facilitating this last night is just, I don't know, I was buzzing all throughout the night. I was just, I'm the facilitator, and yet I was just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So, so the drop down method, I highly, highly, highly recommend you add it to your NLP Master Practitioner Toolkit. It is absolutely mind blowing what can change for your client when you facilitate this one process with confidence. It's amazing. I'm Claire Chancellor from Be Your Purpose Coaching, and I will talk to you later. Bye, guys.